Okay, so it's the top of the hour and we're going to get started. Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us today. So today our webinar is all about IPTV and live streaming 101 and how you can amplify your communications on digital signs. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. So yeah, we'd love to get some questions from you. So as you can see down the bottom here, you can submit them into the GoToWebinar panel, and that's just on your right-hand side. If you submit your questions throughout the webinar, that would be great, and we will try and answer them on the go as we go through this webinar today. We will also be sending out this webinar recording within 24 to 48 hours. So if you miss anything, don't worry, you can always go through and check over bits and pieces, etc. So we'll try and get that out to you as soon as possible too. And then just looking quickly at today, what we're going to be discussing and talking about, just quickly going over the agenda. So firstly, we're going to be looking at what is IPTV. We're going to actually take you a little bit back to some of the basics here. I know this audience is kind of a mixture of experts and beginners, but I think it's always useful just to have that refresher. And then we're also going to have a look at Appspace with IPTV. So yeah, how do they kind of work together? And just so everyone understands how Appspace fits in here. Then we also have Will, who's with us today. He's going to give you a live demo. So you're actually going to see it all in action, how it works, the user interface and everything. So I think that would be really nice for all you guys to see. And then at the end, we're going to have 10 minutes for a Q&A and a bit of a wrap up. But as I said before, please do submit your questions throughout this webinar. I will try and ask Dan and Will on the go. As we go through all the slides and all the demos and everything. So yeah, today's presenters, I'm joined with Will and Dan. I know Dan's just got back from Oslo, from Norway, helping out some of our clients. So Dan, big shout out to you for joining us today, really appreciate that. So I'm just gonna ask Will quickly. Will, would you like to introduce yourself in 30 seconds or so?
Sure, hey everybody. So I'm Will White. I head up our sales engineering team here at Appspace. So that's our consulting system engineering group and some of our implementation folks. I've been with the company for about 10 years. So hopefully know a fair amount about Appspace by this point that I can share with y'all.
Awesome. And Dan, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone, I'm Dan Parker. I've been with Appspace for a little over a year. I am on Will's team as a consulting systems engineer or sales engineer, if you will. Before Appspace, I worked for many years in broadcast and live TV and live streaming for events and whatnot. So a lot of my knowledge I gained from there, I'll hopefully be sharing with y'all today.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for the introduction. And for those, my name is Josh, and I'm going to be the webinar moderator for today. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it back to Dan to kick us off, who's going to explain a little bit about the background about IPTV and live streaming. So over to you, Dan.
Okay, all right. Well, first off, what is IPTV? What is live streaming when we refer to those things? So next slide. Okay, so first off, at its basic, what is IPTV? So we're kind of using IPTV to just replace our traditional copper-backed television solutions, specifically how we distribute those, our programming throughout our organization. So usually you would use, coaxial cables that you have going to every single room where every display is. Everyone's familiar with these. It's what we, used to use with our cable boxes and, or maybe even our modems today. But instead, of course, we've got a network infrastructure everywhere, whether we're using fiber or whether we're using Ethernet, like Cat5, Cat6, Cat8 solutions throughout our building, or even Wi-Fi. So we'll use those to communicate with media players at the display endpoint, and use that leverage that to distribute our programming through the network infrastructure. So just a few examples of the type of content is the same sort of stuff that you would see that you would use today through cable and satellite, for instance. There could be weather and news, but we can supplement that or supplant that with additional programming. It could be webcasts or even town halls, for instance, as well, that we could kind of converge into into those other types of traditional programming. So next slide. Okay, so what are the benefits of IPTV? Well, as I mentioned, we're going to be able to take our own sort of content, any content that we want, and distribute that all over our building, all over our organization, using the network infrastructure that we already have in place, and not having to have a secondary type of infrastructure dedicated just for for television programming. On top of that, this can be highly customizable. The experience can be customizable. We could be using our channel browsing mode in Appspace, for instance, or we could be using electronic programming guides of our choice to bring in and show to the viewer at the endpoint, and curated offerings as well, of course. So we decide what content we are going to have available throughout our organization. And then can you go back? Okay, and then like I said, multiple sources. So this could be video on demand sources, whether it's WebEx recordings, YouTube recordings, hopefully in the future Vimeo recordings. It could be bringing feeds off of head-end units that are coming from traditional cable and satellite. We could be doing our own live streams from town halls or any other number of content delivery networks and sources. And it integrates with our digital signage platform at the end of the day. So we don't only have to mix in all these different sorts of programming and video types. We can even bring in any sort of content that our Appspace platform can utilize today. That could be pre-recorded videos, just MPEG-4s that we uploaded, but of course also our digital signage that we have available to us as well. So next slide. Appspace and IPTV. Next slide, please. All right, so first off, we just want to demystify IPTV. What is it? What is it not? Well, first and foremost, we are not an IPTV provider. That is to say that we are not actually providing the programming. Through Appspace, you're not going to host your town hall necessarily, or bring in a TV channel, so to speak. You're not going to come to us to get that subscription, let's say. However, those things are still going to be, coming through our platform and going to be delivered to the end user through Appspace, so that everyone can have a cohesive experience and have, and you can have all of those offerings in one place and managed within the platform. So we do integrate with IPTV providers. There's a number of IPTV providers, as well as other content delivery networks that we do integrate with, that we would have running through the Appspace platform to do that. So next slide, please. Okay. So integrating IPTV with Appspace, we do work with several out-of-the-box video encoders from leading providers. So a lot of our endpoints that you're deploying Appspace on today, whether they're system on chip or they're dedicated media players, those would be able to display Appspace, of course, and IPTV solutions through Appspace. As I mentioned, it's a unified platform, so we do have one platform where you can have a cohesive experience. This is still going to be the same, the same platform that you manage your digital signage through. And you're also going to be managing your video streams, your IPTV streams, in addition to any other parts of the platform, any other modules of the platform that you're going to be utilizing, whether it's visitor management or space reservation or what have you. Because of this and because of the scalability of the platform, it can be available globally. So you can have, everything can be managed through one location, managed by your marketing department, for instance, and have that available through all sources, all satellite offices that you may have throughout the world. And of course, as I mentioned, it can be accessed anywhere. So Appspace is one of our big advantages, of course, is our our ability to be platform agnostic and work on a number of different devices, a number of different media players out there, system on chip devices, computers, tablets, phones, what have you. Next slide, please. So which partners do we use? There are several that we integrate with, and this is not the end all be all list either. This is just a few that we do work with, particularly providers that do have IPTV solutions, Vbrick, Haivision, and MediaStar, to name a few. So these guys provide all sorts of things, whether it's head-end units to bring in traditional feeds, whether it's content delivery systems, content management systems, for instance, to be able to manage programming, or even encoder boxes, or the ability to transmux streams, or what have you. And also, of course, boxes at the display endpoint that would actually be running your Appspace solution, powering your display for your users and anyone in your organization. So next slide. I think we are going to move on with the demo. So I'm going to hand it off to Will, and he's going to show you how this is actually going to be running in Appspace. And there's a couple of different ways that that's going to happen. And Will show you that.
All right, everybody. So give me one moment. Let me share my screen. We got, of course, make sure I'm sharing the right one. Here we go. All right.
Yep, it's good. We can see it.
Perfect. I got apologies, moving some webinar windows around. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in and talk through the practical use cases. I did see some questions coming in. I answered a couple of ones, but I think we're getting some more in-depth ones here. So I'll try to address some. We may double back to them. But let's just start with some basic workflows in Appspace. So Dan kind of laid the groundwork there, right? We're not producing the IPTV streams in Appspace. That usually requires some type of streaming infrastructure to actually produce those streams. But once those streams are available, that's where we can essentially utilize them as part of Appspace publishing, right? Get them on a digital sign or interrupt like normal signage to show the stream, something along those lines. So we're going to go through a couple of different ways to do that. To that end, I'm currently in my little demo sandbox here within Appspace, just a little demo account that I have to show you some examples. We'll go through a couple of different publishing workflows here. So again, assuming that I already have the stream available, we can always dig into that a little bit more in the Q&A, but assuming I have that stream available, I've worked maybe with one of those IPTV partners you just saw, now it's time to pull that into Appspace. So the first thing I'm going to do is here in my account, I'm going to jump to channels. And we're going to create what we call a live channel. So there are essentially two ways to pull an IPTV in Appspace. One is via a live channel. One is just as a piece of content. A live channel is a separate channel, right? If you're familiar with channels in Appspace, they're basically how you get content to the right screen or the right user or so on. Most channels in Appspace are what we call a playlist channel. So for example, I have a corporate communications channel here, and it's full of slides, it's full of images, maybe videos, like pre-recorded videos, like MP4 videos, for example, that might loop through on a digital sign, right? Traditional playlists. But we also have what we call live channels. I've already got one created here, but we're going to create a new one. So what I'll do is up here at the top where it says create, I'm going to click the little drop down to get access to other channel types. And you'll see there is a live channel option. We're going to give this a name. I'm going to use NASA has a IPTV live stream available over the internet. So that's what I'm using for our example here today. So I'll go ahead and give it a name. I could give it a custom logo or something like that, but we're going to leave it on the default for now and click create. So what that's going to do is create my live channel here in Appspace. Now, most channels, again, this is where you'd be prompted to add content, right? Add your slides, your cards, your images, etc., and change scheduling and so on. With a live channel, there's really only one step, and that's to configure the actual IPTV stream. So you'll see right up at the top, it's asking for that stream address. Now, if you're unfamiliar with IPTV streams, they can come in multiple formats. There's multicast streams, there's unicast streams. Within multicast streams, there are multiple different formats. part of which you would choose can depend on your streaming provider and what they offer, right, what formats they can actually put out. Another part of that choice, which I think we had a pre-submitted question actually that touched on this, it comes down to what your actual devices support, right? So different media players will support different streaming formats, and we documented a lot of that on our knowledge center in terms of what can be used. Now, what it's asking for here, you'll see this live stream section is defaulting to HLS. That's going to be the most commonly supported stream type. That's what we call a unicast stream. And that's what you typically see for web streams, right? So if you go watch a YouTube video, whether it's a kind of a pre-recorded YouTube video or a live stream on YouTube, that's a unicast stream, right? And the reason those are the most widely supported, the reason that's the default here, is because those will work on any device that Appspace supports. So any signage device or collaboration device, things like that, right? Basically, all it takes to show those kind of streams is a web browser. So very easy to support across the board. Doesn't matter what the device can or cannot do, they can all support an HLS stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy my stream address and drop it over. NASA TV stream address here. Typically for an HLS stream, you're going to see something like this. It's going to look like a URL, a web address, and it's usually going to end in .m3u8. That's the extension there. It doesn't matter too much, but just something to keep in mind. Now, one thing I'll note is if you have a streaming infrastructure, again, you've worked with one of those streaming partners to set up a bunch of different channels in your environment, you're probably going to end up with a lot of different stream addresses, usually one per channel or one per live stream or IPTV stream, right? So if you have 2 different camera feeds for a town hall, right, they're probably going to each have their own stream address, something like that. So again, this one I'm setting up is for NASA. If I had a different stream, like you saw earlier, I had one set up for Bloomberg TV, who also publishes an IPTV stream online. Right, I have different addresses for different channels. One thing I'll note, there's this little drop down here, right? I mentioned multicast earlier. There's also the option to add another stream. If I did have a multicast version of this same stream, I could actually add it. And what that would do is use the right format for the device that's playing back the stream. I don't see this too commonly, but you might use this if you have a mixed deployment where you have some BrightSign devices that can support multicast and some Windows 10 devices that can only support the HLS unicast streams. If you had access to both stream formats, you could add them both here. Typically multicast streams, I don't have one to show you a live stream. They're a little bit trickier to set up. I don't have a multicast enabled network here in my home network, working remote. But if you have that available, it might be an RTP stream or a UDP stream. So it might look something like this, where it would be RTP : / instead of HTTP. And then maybe an IP address. Right, an IP address is normally numbers, but I'm just typing in the word for the sake of an example. And then maybe a port, right? So maybe it's 123.123.123, whatever that IP address is, : 12345, whatever the port is, right? That's going to be determined by that streaming infrastructure from those streaming providers. But it would look something roughly like that. Now, since I'm just doing unicast for our demo today, I'm going to get rid of that, but I did want to highlight the opportunity to actually add both streaming formats. We'll add some call letters here. This is kind of typical traditional TV call letters. They can be anything. They don't have to match with what you're actually showing. It's more for reference within Appspace. I could also add a channel number if I want to. It says it's optional, but if you're using our channel browsing mode, which I'll show you in a second, that can determine what order the channels show in. And then lastly, there's an option for EPG provider. I'm not going to add one here, but what EPGs are electronic programming guides. That's kind of your channel guide, right? So if this was a TV live stream, that would show like what's playing now, what's coming up next, just like a cable or satellite box. Typically, those are services you'd have to pay for, right? If you're working with a cable or satellite provider to get IPTV, usually they do charge for that EPG data, right? They don't want to give that away for free. They like people to watch TV the old-fashioned way. But if you do have that available, that's where you can tie it and say, actually, this works with this provider and it's associated with this particular channel. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and click save, and we've saved our live channel. Now, these live channels, these are the simplest way to publish IPTV. They're designed to be basically viewed full screen, right? So if I publish this channel to a device, it's going to show full screen. So in this case, if I had a digital sign that I wanted to show this NASA TV live stream all day, every day, I could just set the channel to play it, and that's all it would do. It would look like a TV tuned to NASA TV, right? That's basically it. The other thing that these live channels are really useful for is for our channel browsing mode. So I've actually got a channel browsing device set up. I'm gonna go ahead and publish this live channel to it. so we can see what that looks like. So again, live channels. If I jump back to my channels here, live channels like this NASA TV channel, useful for full screen IPTV or as an option within our interactive channel browsing mode. Let me let that refresh. We'll actually do it the quick way here. I'm going to jump to my device to show you what it looks like. So I've got a device here in that channel browsing mode. If you haven't seen this before, we like to think of this as kind of our corporate Netflix almost, right? It gives you kind of an on-demand interactive experience. This works great with touch screens or even tablets. It also works great with smart TV remote control. So if you have a Samsung Tizen display or an LG WebOS, you can use the remote control to navigate. But let's open this up in a new window. It might look something like this. So I've got my kind of welcome screen. It's almost like a kiosk view, and I've got those live channels. So there's the one I created before this webinar. Here's the one I just created. I also added some more traditional signage channels if I swipe or scroll down here, but I could click into one of these and actually view that live stream. So you could actually have multiple channels, multiple IPTV channels available, and actually load that up to have an on-demand experience. And hopefully NASA's stream is coming through here. Well, it looks like it didn't. So Bloomberg loaded up. Always the trouble with doing live demos with content that's not ours, right? It's coming from NASA. Maybe it'll load, maybe it won't, depending on if they're actually broadcasting. But you get the idea, right? Is it makes these streams available on demand if you wanted that type of true channel browsing, right? Channel surfing experience. So jumping back, there are a couple of things I wanted to make sure to touch on during kind of our stock demo section, the stuff that we want to make sure to cover, and then we'll jump into what looks like a lot of questions that have come in. I can see them out of the corner of my eye. But the other situation or publishing scenario I wanted to touch on is if you wanted an IPTV stream or a live stream to basically just be another piece of content. So what if you're not using that interactive channel browsing mode? Or what if you want, you don't just want full screen IPTV, you want maybe to rotate through multiple pieces of content, maybe show signage for a while, then show IPTV, or even do a multi-zone layout. How would you do that? This is something I always like to cover when we talk about IPTV, because it's not quite as obvious as the live channel, right? If you see live channel, you might think, okay, yeah, live streams, got it. But adding a live stream as a piece of content, it's a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is jump to my main menu here and actually go to the content library, because again, we're going to add the stream as an individual piece of content. So here I am in the library. I've got my images, my videos, my cards, my things like that. What I'm going to do is click Create to go to the card gallery. In my different categories here at the left, instead of maybe jumping to my feed cards where I could pull in a YouTube video, which by the way is kind of like a live stream. In fact, you can actually pull in YouTube live streams as another way to handle IPTV. If you wanted to do a live stream via YouTube, you could use our YouTube card to pull that in. But in this more traditional use case, instead what I'm going to jump to is the legacy section. And then I'm going to choose external legacy. So external legacy is kind of a catch-all, right? It's why it's got a very generic name. We can use it to pull in a lot of different external content types, but that includes IPTV streams. So what I'll do is first select what I want to pull in, which is video, right? It's a live video. And then I'll jump in, or I'll drop in that stream address. And since NASA was giving me trouble, let's drop in that Bloomberg stream address instead. We'll give it a name. It may preview if we can pull it through, but otherwise we've got that address in there. We selected video, we'll click save, and it's going to add that stream as a content item within the content library. So there we go. Now that's basically ready to get added into signage. So now I can go back to my channels and actually add that in a couple of different ways. So for example, if I had this Corp Comms Global channel, right, it's got a bunch of my corporate communications content here. Maybe part of this rotation, I wanted to show that live stream for a minute or something like that. I could simply click add, browse to my library, just like I was browsing for any other piece of content, and add that stream. Right, click add, and it'll basically add it to my playlist, add it to the rotation. So I could, just like any other content, I could change the order, and I could also change the timing. And this is very important because live streams, well, they don't really have a defined start and end. So I might say, I want this to show, let's go for a minute, right? So every time this sign loops, it's going to play through these 4 items. It's going to show the stream for a minute. Then it's going to play through the rest of the items and start back at the top, right? So that's one way to kind of add live streams into your signage rotation. Another potential way to handle this would be with our multi-zone channels. So I've got an example multi-zone channel here. It's got a bunch of content going on, but maybe I want to show my live stream, that Bloomberg stream, here in this main zone. I could click in and I could add content, or maybe even just click to edit the playlist. And just like before, I'll add that live stream content item here. I'm going to add that to the zone. So now it's just going to play in that one section of the screen. In fact, if I go to my preview, just to give you an example, I don't know how well this will animate on the webinar here, but we'll give it a second to load. You can see that stream in the main zone and then other content around it, right? I've got a Twitter card, I've got a banner, things like that. So you can kind of see what that would look like. Now, one caveat, right? I'll throw this out there as kind of a best practice or a cautionary statement, is when you start doing this sort of thing, where you've got live streaming right alongside other content, right? There's a lot going on a digital sign. That can be pretty taxing on the device. So depending on your device type, depending on how capable it is, how performant it is, I would just advise testing this sort of thing out before you commit to it, right? Some devices, if you have a low spec Windows PC or maybe you know, something in the mid-range bright sign, right? Something like that, it's going to struggle to render all of this stuff at once, right? It's not like my laptop that has a, you know, processor and all of that. It's a lot going on. So that's my little caveat there in terms of how you might end up using these multi-zone layouts. Now, one last part of the demo before we jump to questions that I did want to highlight is a new use case in Appspace, period, and a new use case for those live channels, right? So we created the live channels earlier. We just recently released a module. If you haven't seen it yet or haven't had a chance to play with it, we released a module called Broadcasts. And if you guess by the name of it, live IPTV streaming can actually tie into this module. Now, Broadcasts lets you essentially take over screens or push out messaging at a moment's notice. And this isn't just for IPTV, this isn't just for live streaming, despite the name's Broadcast. This could be used for canned messages. Maybe it's a message just that the town hall is about to start, right? Like a slide. Maybe it's you know, the food truck event that we're having is about to start. Maybe it's for emergency messaging. You could use Broadcast to push out fire alarms and take over digital signage or room booking panels to say, you know, hey, the fire alarm's going off. Please proceed to your nearest exit, something along those lines. A lot of different use cases for Broadcast, not just IPTV, but IPTV is one of them. So just to kind of show you what that would look like, I'm gonna go ahead and create a broadcast. And again, what these do is interrupt normal content in one way or another. So the very first thing this broadcast is going to ask is, what do I want to broadcast? What am I interrupting with? So that could be a piece of media. That could be a little text snippet. So if I just wanted to show a little message at the bottom of a digital sign to say like, hey, don't forget, you know, self-reviews are due soon or something like that, I could do that. But in this case, what I want to highlight is the option to broadcast a channel. So this is another use case for those live channels. I can click to select a channel. I can choose my live channel, right? That's really it for this step. I could add a message or so on. Typically, you won't see that on digital signage, but I've selected a live channel. I'm going to leave it on standard priority. You'll notice there is a priority for broadcast. I don't want to dig too deep into this product feature, but typically we reserve critical for true emergencies, right? You don't want to be broadcasting this Bloomberg channel and then have an actual fire alarm go off and not be able to interrupt. So we're going to leave this on standard so that a critical actual emergency broadcast can override it. But regardless, I've selected my live channel. I'm going to click next. I'm going to choose where this is going to show up. So, right, I want to do a screen takeover. I want to interrupt with this live stream, and then maybe I could target all of my signage devices, or maybe just a specific device or specific set of devices. So let's actually target that one device that I had earlier. There we go. Again, could be a group, could be an entire location. Maybe you're doing a takeover at a certain office. It's very flexible as far as that goes. And then I'm going to choose how this actually functions. So do I want to take over now, right? I want to interrupt the signage right this moment and show this live stream. Do I want to schedule this for later? This is huge for town halls, right? So if you're doing a live broadcast of a town hall, you've got that town hall stream on your network that you want to pull in and show on the signage. This is great because you can schedule it to happen at the exact right day and time. Or you could even do fancy things like API triggers and actually tie our broadcast feature into other systems to show that live stream. In this case, let's just say now, and we're just gonna let this run until I come in and manually deactivate it. There we go, so we'll do the summary, right? We're gonna broadcast to one device today until it's manually deactivated. We'll click save, let that broadcast run. And it should take over here in a minute, right? To interrupt those screens. So again, just wanted to highlight that's actually kind of a separate feature to just strictly IPTV, but it's really useful for IPTV as a way to interrupt signage. So I'm going to pause there. I'll probably keep my screen shared because I have a hunch that we might need to look at some stuff on the platform as we go through questions. I think a bunch came in. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Will. I think let's definitely keep your demo environment up because, yeah, our Q&A is on fire, let's say. There's a lot of questions. And guys, keep on putting the questions in there. We'd love to answer them. And if we can't answer them today, obviously, then we get back to you via email, of course, to make sure you get all your answers. So I think let's start from the very top then, and let's go through some of these questions. Okay, I have a question from, I'm going to just point these to Will, Dan, whichever person you think is better to answer these. What permission level is required for the broadcast module? And that's a question.
Now, Josh, your connection might have hung up a little bit. I think I got the general gist of what permission is required or what permission is required for the broadcast module. There we go, Josh, you're back. A little bit of hiccup there. So in terms of permission level, two-part answer. Today, any publisher can essentially initiate a broadcast to their devices, but we're actually right around the corner from refining that. Some of the very first feedback we got in limited release, and as we released that broadcast module to GA, is that folks want more granular permissions on who can use broadcast, what can they target, what they can do, and so on. So that's actually on our, I believe it's our 30-day roadmap here very shortly to refine those permissions, make them a little bit more granular. So I don't have a nice, pretty permission map for you today, but as soon as we have details, we can share that. In fact, maybe Josh, that's a takeaway for us to get with the product team and see if we can get a little bit of a preview write-up that we can share with the group on that.
Sure thing. And I know you were just speaking about the broadcast module or option there. I have a question coming in for Greg. How can he actually get that? Is that something he needs to buy extra, or how would that work?
So that is included with Appspace by default, right? It's not an extra module you have to buy or get charged for. It should be GA, so it should show up here in the menu. If you don't see it, either A, you've got low permissions, or B, you might actually be an Appspace private cloud customer. Our private cloud offering usually follows delayed release cycle. We let everything kind of get baked in on the public cloud, and then private cloud follows thereafter to give those customers a little bit more time to prep for changes and things like that. So it might not have rolled out to your private cloud yet, but you can always reach out to your customer success manager.
I believe private cloud rolled out about a week ago. So it should be the private cloud. So it might be just a permissions thing at that point.
Yeah, I'd recommend either reach out to your customer success manager, or you can submit a ticket with our customer care team, a support ticket, and we can get that squared away.
Alrighty, these questions just keep on coming in, which we love. I think we're going to have a lot of follow-up, Will and Dan, today, but that's great. I have Hector Cortez. How do you find the multi-zone channel?
So yeah, multi-zone can be a little bit tricky to find. It's also a relatively new feature. A little bit of an Appspace history lesson. If you're a longtime Appspace user, you might be familiar with advanced channels. They're very customizable multi-zone channels. Multi-zone are designed to be kind of the easy way to do that. Again, jumping back to the one I had, right? Very simple to manage kind of zones on the screen where you can just jump in, quickly add content, edit your playlist, and so on. To create those, if you click the create button here, it's going to, by default, create a full screen playlist channel, right? Just full screen content looping through. But if you click view more options, this is where you'll see a device app template option. And this is where we'll have our built-in multi-zone selections. So for example, maybe I just want a simple, main section with kind of a sidebar. I could select that, give it a creative name here and click create, right? And it's going to give me a template that looks like that. In fact, I could even come over here to settings and actually change that template to something else here in the channel itself. So if you decide, actually, that's not the one I want, I just wanted a big main zone with a banner, I could adjust that. And if I go back to edit, again, you'll see that different arrangement. So just have to go to that little more options option there.
Okay, another question from Greg. Can you do a broadcast of a Zoom live event?
So Zoom live events are a little bit tricky. We do we are looking at options for that, but we don't have it supported now. The tricky part with a lot of those kind of meeting providers, Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and so on, is of course they want you to use their software, right? They want to keep you in that ecosystem. So usually those streams are not natively a true IPTV format, right? They're a Zoom format, they're a WebEx format, and so on. So it's not easy out of the box. There are ways to do it. You can use a traditional streaming provider to basically take that Zoom meeting as an input and then rebroadcast it as maybe an HLS stream on the network. That's one way to do it. Certainly have customers that do that. I've also seen folks use some of the built-in YouTube integrations. So for example, Zoom can actually broadcast a Zoom meeting to YouTube Live, and then we can pull in that YouTube Live via the YouTube card that I referenced earlier. You just grab that YouTube Live address, drop it in the YouTube card, and pull it in that way. So not directly yet, but there are some ways you might be able to make that happen.
Okay, we have another question here from Chris. Could you provide a quick example or case study about API triggers as a use case?
So getting into broadcasts. So let's jump back to broadcasts. We're gonna run through. We'll do the same thing here, and just to get back to where we were before. Okay, great. Let's say all devices. Again, I'm just blowing through this because I wanted to get to this page for API triggers. So effectively, right, you'll see the API link will only be available after you created the broadcast. Basically, what that allows you to do is pull out the API triggers and embed them in another system. In fact, if you're familiar with Appspace's alerts module, which is kind of the predecessor to broadcast, it had some similar features, just not quite as robust. We couldn't do like API access tokens and things like that. You can choose and enable which options you want. As far as use cases, hopefully the integration is pretty simple. The most common is integrating with systems that handle emergency messaging. So you have something like Single Wire Informacast or Rave or Alertus, right? Different tools out there that I've seen a lot of our customers use to send out SMS messages and email blasts or whatever, if a fire alarm goes off or there's severe weather or things like that. Typically, you can just add an extra action in those systems to then trigger our broadcast. So if the fire alarm gets triggered and that system sends out, mass text and email or whatever, it could also just hit the API trigger for the broadcast and flip the signage over to your fire evacuation map or something along those lines. So that's by far the most common I've seen, but we've done all kinds of fun stuff. I've triggered broadcasts via like voice assistants. Actually at ISE, we had a big red button on the wall we could slam that would flip all the signage in our booth over to a message, right? All kinds of interesting things you can do here. Donuts in the break room, right? It doesn't have to be an emergency, but any kind of trigger from another system, or just manually, maybe you save the trigger on your phone and hit the link that way to flip signage over, could be a cool use case. But again, most commonly, it's that emergency integration that we see.
Okay, I have another question here coming from Paul, talking about the Poly X50 devices. So how will these kind of features work on a Poly device?
So the Poly devices do run our full Appspace app, which means they could show HLS streams. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying in the beginning, most devices do not support multicast streams. So again, keep that in mind, but they can show those HLS streams. Should be able to handle it pretty well. We don't do a ton of testing around that because it's not a primary use case for those devices, but should be fine. The caveat is on Poly devices and really any collaboration device, so a WebEx RoomKit, things like that, maybe a Crestron, AirMedia, anything along those lines. The only time that they're showing the Appspace app is when they're on idle or when they're in their screensaver mode, right? So when they're not doing something else, when you're not using the Poly device for a screen share or a video call, that's when Appspace will show, and that's when you could show a stream, right? If there's a live call going on, well, the base functionality of the device takes precedent. We're not really allowed to interrupt that, so you wouldn't be able to interrupt with the live stream. But if it's in that kind of idle screensaver mode, that's when you could do that.
Okay, cool. Another question just came in from Greg. How could this integrate with the advanced channels? So,
okay, so
defined advanced channel goes back after the broadcast.
Got it. Okay, so two things there, I suppose. One, if I go back to the content library where I created the IPTV stream as a content item, right? I use that external legacy. You could add that to a media zone in an advanced channel. So if you're talking about within an advanced channel itself, you could add a stream that way to a media zone. If you're talking about that second part of going back to the advanced channel after the broadcast, that is how broadcasts function. So if I use the broadcast feature here, and basically interrupt an advanced channel playing on a sign or on multiple signs, and the broadcast ends, it'll go right back to that advanced channel. So you can interrupt your advanced channels on a sign, the broadcast, and then when it ends, right, they'll go back to the normal programming. So no need to worry about switching them back and forth.
Okay. Another question from Chris. Do you know of any providers who provide stock ticker streams? What is the best way to add a real-time ticker to a display?
Okay. That can be a little bit tricky. We do have what we call a stock card. So here under feeds, there is an option to display stocks. This isn't actually truly an IPTV stream, right? This is just pulling in live data. So it's not really a video stream, right? It's pulling in financial data. You can see general stock data, right? I can add symbols here, whatever it might be. And it'll basically show the latest stock prices there. This is built into Appspace. You can use this all day, every day. Now the data is on a bit of a delay. I think it's a 15-minute delay, right? So it's not up to the second data. You can't, for example, track some general indexes, right? It's individual stock symbols. And part of the limitation there is because, well, faster data or more specific data is almost always behind paywalls, right? Of course, all the financial companies that track all that want you to pay for access to it. So here's what we offer for free. If you have a more precise use case that takes data that isn't surfaced here in the stock card, reach out to us. We can potentially integrate with different data providers to pull that in, but that's probably going to be a custom engagement and of course require usually paid access to that data source. Gets a little bit tricky.
Okay, a quick kind of request question from Vinny here. Can you touch on how to create that channel browsing, or is that just a player list?
Yeah. So I showed channel browsing earlier, right? We've got all the multiple channels available, but how you'd actually create that is really more on the device level. So if I navigate here to my devices, you'll see I've got my device here, just my web browser, and it's actually running in channel browsing mode. So when you first register a device, or if you modify a device after the fact, you can choose the different modes. There's single channel mode. That's the most traditional signage mode. You tell it to just play one channel forever. We see that used most commonly maybe for a room booking panel where that's all it does. There's autoplay mode where it loops through multiple playlist channels at a time. So those full screen playlist channels, maybe you've got a global corporate communications channel and a local site channel, and you want it to play both. That's where autoplay comes into play. And then there's the user can browse published channels option. And when you select that, what it'll do is it'll set the device to channel browsing. Now that doesn't necessarily do anything on its own. There's a second step here. So you set the device to channel browsing. The next step is to go to your channels and actually publish that to the device. So for example, if I go to let's go to this one here and go to publish, you'll see it is now published to that channel browsing device. I could publish to one device, I could publish to multiple. And what that does is the device knows that it's in channel browsing mode, so it just automatically creates this kind of interface and adds that channel as a button that could be clicked into, again, whether it's a live stream or whether it's traditional signage content that might cycle through, and I could actually jump ahead, right, view the content that I want, kind of an interactive mode there. I will note that I've spruced this up a little bit. I've added kind of a background. I've added some extra behavior, like you see where it blurs when I swipe up. There's a lot of configuration above and beyond just that simple set it to mode and publish your channels. All that's documented in the Knowledge Center. If you search for customized channel browsing on our Knowledge Center, you'll see all the different ways you can like customize the logo and the effects and the layout and so on.
Okay, thanks, Will. Brandon is asking where we can find the entire list of IPTV partners, the Appspace ones. I guess that would be somewhere on our website, Knowledge Center.
We may track some on the website. That may be a follow-up item. The interesting bit there is that really, we can work with just about any IPTV provider, right? There's, as long as they're providing the stream in a supported format, and I mean supported by the devices you're using, and that stream's accessible on your network, we can pull it in and display it. So at the end of the day, just like with the devices we support, Appspace is actually pretty agnostic in terms of who's providing that IPTV stream, right? The most common that we work with are Vbrick, Haivision, MediaStar, the ones you saw on the slide earlier. I've seen people use Wowza, which is kind of a cloud-based streaming format, right? There are a bunch of them out there. So I don't think we have an exhaustive list, but maybe that's something we can follow up with.
Okay, questions just keep on coming in, Will. So we'll keep on answering them. Another question from Chris: are there branding opportunities in the IPTV space, or is this a question really kind of, you know, for the providers, Vbrick, MediaStar?
So for what surrounds the IPTV stream, you could certainly brand it in Appspace, right? If you're doing the multi-zone template where you've got your own branding kind of surrounding that IPTV stream, or in channel browsing mode, again, there are those customizations options I referenced to have, you know, your logo and background and all that good stuff there. But in terms of the actual stream itself, yeah, that'd be a question for the IPTV provider if you wanted IPTV provider to maybe overlay something in that actual stream if they have that capability. Usually a bit outside of what Appspace can do, because again, we're just consuming that raw stream directly.
Yeah, I would just say, usually for anything like that, like if you're doing if you're bringing in like traditional cable or satellite, they generally don't want any part of their stream to be interrupted, whether it's overlaying a graphic or saying, okay, I'm going to do my commercials during their commercial breaks. Usually it's somewhere in the agreement that they're not going to allow something like that. So I would say to err on the side of caution. If you are wanting to do anything, it really needs to be content that you own from start to finish, that you know, that you're going to have any sort of branding on or anything like that, like a town hall, for instance.
We still have 10 minutes, but I will try and get everyone out of here before the top of the hour. Another question.
Too quickly, Will.
Another question from Kelly here. Can you please address the repurposing of traditional cable satellite feeds throughout our existing network and the legality of doing that without purchasing extra setup boxes from the provider? So she's saying here, for example, for every TV I display a cable channel on, I'm required to pay for that via an additional setup box from my cable provider.
Right, and that's when you do want to talk to some of these partners that we mentioned at the start of the broadcast. And this is not everybody that provides this sort of solution. There's others, you know, but we mentioned Vbrick, MediaStar, Haivision, for instance. You know, Triple Play, for instance, would be another one. Off the top of my head. But generally speaking, this is what the head-in solution that I've mentioned a few times throughout the broadcast. And really what that is your essentially your TV signal comes in, whether it's cable or satellite, and then it comes into a head-in unit. That head-in unit takes that signal, it will encode it so that it can be distributed on the network itself to all of your devices. So this is really the strength that we have to be able to distribute IPTV as well, because now instead of having to have any sort of purpose-built box, you know, it can be anything that runs Appspace. Now, as Will mentioned earlier, you do have to be a little cautious sometimes, depending on the solution that you go with. You know, if you do have a head-in unit that's going to be doing something like this, it's probably going to be doing a multicast stream of this stuff. And generally speaking, PWA or computer-based applications like, you know, Windows or a Chrome-based application might not show a multicast stream, might not have that ability to do so. But purpose-built media players, BrightSign, for instance, would be one, or even system-on-chip devices like LG or Samsung or Sony would have the ability to display those streams.
Thanks, Dan, for that. Another question we have in here from Tim. Is there a relay server I can use to stream on-prem content?
Yeah, that's also another conversation for any of those guys. You know, Vbrick, I know in particular, is pretty big on that. They do have their own sort of content management system, so that you can essentially be your own channel programmer, essentially your own master control, if you will, to have your own programming schedule, hosting those video files, for instance, as well, whatever you know, whatever they need to be.
One other thing I'll add to that too, because I think I saw a related question about like firewall and things like that. Typically with those streaming providers and that infrastructure, that's usually going to exist on your network, right? So it's broadcasting the stream within your network, maybe within your firewall, and that's actually perfectly fine from the Appspace perspective, as long as the Appspace player devices, right, the devices behind your TVs or the TVs themselves can reach that stream on your network. That's fine. It doesn't have to route through our cloud or anything along those lines, right? We're just basically allowing the local devices to consume the stream. So in those scenarios, if it is confined within your network, if you don't allow external access to view those streams, that's not a showstopper for Appspace. It may not preview correctly here, right? But when it plays on the actual device, as long as that device is on the same network as the stream, you're going to be good.
I would even add to something like that, sort of if you will, a hybrid model almost, where you have internet connectivity, but your content is stored online, would probably be preferable to your IT or IS departments, because they don't want everyone, you know, every single endpoint reaching out and having to take up, you know, 10, 20 megabits of internet bandwidth to go out somewhere. So when you do have that content stored locally, or even to the earlier point, you have a head-end unit that is rebroadcasting, doing a multicast broadcast of video streams, then you have far less internet bandwidth and far less network bandwidth being consumed for those types of solutions. So your ITIS guys are going to be very happy about something like that.
Okay, thanks, Will and Dan, for those for answering all those questions there. Will, do you want to share the slides back with me? Yeah, let's get those. I think you should be able to see my slides now, Will. If you could confirm. Yep. Cool. So we've only got 8 minutes left, but I thought, hey, let's give some time back to everyone. The questions that we didn't answer, of course, we're going to get back to you via email, so don't worry about that. We'll make sure you get your detailed replies there. Just wanted to let you know, if you wanted to see a little bit more of Appspace, we've got another up and coming webinar, which is on Thursday, March 16th. And this is what Will was talking about. So our new feature is going to be a deep dive, a webinar looking at broadcasts and alerts. So if you want to get all your vital communications out on all your channels, definitely join this one. It's a nice webinar. We've already done the Q&A, so we did it a little bit back to front, but we did it with Will's demo environment to help us there. And then just to say thank you for everyone joining today. I hope the session was useful for everyone. I'd like to say thank you to Dan and to Will, also for your presentations, your demos, and all the questions you've answered. So from the Appspace team, we wish you a great day and hope to see you soon in another webinar. Goodbye from us. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.